Hi, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. Hello, and welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. It's so great to have you part of this little community that we're creating. And if you are a regular listener, thank you so much for being here. I just love connecting with you guys. And I hope that you have been enjoying this little solo summer series project that I've done during these dog days of summer. This is actually the last one for the summer because I can't believe we are coming into September already. Oh my goodness. But we are heading into one of my favorite times of the year. So I'm really excited about that. But I wondered how you guys have enjoyed this different form of content. Normally, I do longer form content with interviews, and I'm still continuing to do that. But I wondered how you resonate with some of this shorter form content, some of these solo um, episodes with focused topics. So let me know in the comments what you think about this, if you'd like to see more of it, because I'd be more than happy to do this on a more regular basis with you. It's an opportunity that I can speak to specific things that you are interested in learning more about. So if there are particular things that you want me to focus on, or there are particular things that you're maybe struggling with or kind of feeling overwhelmed with when it comes to nourishing your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul, let me know. Either leave a note in the comments. You can also message me directly on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. And you can also email me. I've got all that information in the show notes. So yeah, reach out and let me know what you need some help with, and I will create content to support you with that. So today, what I wanted to kind of talk to you about in this series, we've covered just touching, very much the surface, but we've looked at some ideas around nutrition. We've also talked about energetics. And today I'd like to talk to you about a component of nourishment that I think actually gets really overlooked, and I find is one of the most important kind of key ingredients to how we start to nourish both ourselves and our dogs. And it's been particularly important on my health journey with Lucky. So I wanted to share it with you today. And that is this idea of well being. And what I mean by well being, and specifically well being practices, are holistic practices that help us to piece together the kind of puzzle that we're dealing with when it comes to health. And particularly with a focus on energy work, which is a little bit different from energetics in the way that I've talked about it previously, which in that context, I'm coming more from traditional Chinese medicine understandings of how the body works and how energy flows through the body. But this does relate to it. So this is why I kind of want to talk to it, but more specifically. When I'm talking about well-being, I'm often referring to things that we might hear of as complementary and alternative therapies. So energy work, Reiki, breath work. And today I want to talk to you about something specific within this, because I will talk to you about those other things. I am a Reiki master, if you're not aware of that. So I definitely do use Reiki in my own practice. And I actually got into Reiki as a result of Lucky struggling with his kidneys and with GI issues. So he's been the catalyst for, oh my God, so much healing that has benefited him and benefited me and exposed me to a lot of different ways of thinking about health and working with health, again, from a truly holistic perspective, where we're looking at the whole body and the way that the mind, body, and soul kind of come together, and different things that we can be doing to support that. But so I will be touching on things like Reiki, but I wanted to share with you a little bit about how I got into this through a really chance encounter with a homeopath who was practicing what we call holistic kinesiology. Kinesiology is an alternative therapy or a complementary therapy that, similar to TCM perspectives, looks at how the body, how energy moves through the body. And it works specifically with biofeedback from muscles. And the idea is that health occurs, or health is a state of being when energy is flowing properly through the body. And that when there are blockages, that's when ease presents itself in the body. So the aim with holistic kinesiology is to actually talk to the body and through muscle testing in order to, and some other things, but I'm going to focus on the muscle testing aspect of it. But it uses the body's ability to communicate with us in different ways to see where there might be blocks. And those blocks can come from a block in energy flow. It can be there's a physical block or an emotional block that is then translating into dis-ease in the body. And I was aware of kinesiology for many, many years before this particular experience happened for me, but I'd never really done anything. I'd never really explored it. I was just familiar with it and familiar with the concept that when we work with muscle testing, we are looking at when there are blockages in the body, when there is that dis-ease, when there's imbalance, the muscles will present as weaker to response to questions essentially that we're posing. They give us back weak responses. And it's working as well with the subconscious mind, which bypasses the kind of logical mind in order to shed light on some things that we might not necessarily be aware of. So I'm going to explain to you how I was exposed to this with Lucky. And I'll talk to you about how I actually use this now within my nutrition consults with clients because it has been invaluable for pointing to things that don't necessarily get picked up in traditional ways. And again, as a canine nutrition consultant, I'm not diagnosing anything, but I am looking at how is the body able to communicate with us in different ways and give us some different information that then you as the pet parent can actually go back to your vet and ask them about and look at things some more specifically. It also points to things in a similar way to TCM, where when we see that a particular system might be out of balance from the nutrition perspective, I can then help you to customize the diet by providing things that help to providing foods and providing supplements that help to actually bring things back into balance. So I'll talk to you about how it worked with Lucky, and I'll talk to you about some examples of how I've used it with clients that have been just incredible. So I've talked to you before about how Lucky's health journey has presented a number of different challenges, particularly when he was younger. And it started with kidney issues and GI issues at the same time. And so much of my my way of working with Lucky was trying to figure out what I could even do about this, but wanting to take a more natural route rather than just applying drugs to hide symptoms. And part of his GI issues resulted in him having really, really blocked anal glands. And he was incredibly aggressive. When you would even approach his hind area, he would snap. And then he was obviously in so much pain and he was just so guarding that area. And after I've mentioned in the interview that I did with Vivian Beerley, how I started to notice that he was chewing at his hock area, basically his ankle. He just kept like gnawing on it. And I had seen Vivian Beerley put out a video where she was demonstrating acupressure points. And this particular one she was focusing on was the acupressure point for anal glands. And so, as a result of seeing that video, which the universe works in miraculous ways, right? Like things just kind of show up when you need it. And that happened to show up in my feed as I needed it. And because we didn't know what was going on with Lucky, I was having to have his well, actually at that point we weren't even expressing his anal glands because we didn't know he had a problem, but I was in there like every week because he was in so much pain and he was just being given painkillers because we didn't know what was wrong with him. And I knew this can't continue. Like we have to get to the heart of what's actually going on. We need to get to the root of the problem and solve it from there. But we didn't know what was going on with him. And so after I saw that video that Vivian put together of the acupressure points for the anal glands, I went back to my vet and I said, "Is there any chance that Lucky has an anal gland issue?" And she said, "Well, let's check it. Let's check." And then she did express his glands, and they were completely full, and that relieved him for a little period of time. But again, it would come back within like 7 to 10 days. At first, it was like 5 days. But we were basically in there like every week to week and a half having his anal glands expressed. And I was like, this is not normal. And I know that this isn't healthy, what can I do about this beyond like starting to work on massaging his acupressure point on his heel, on his hock. And I had been doing a little bit of research into various holistic remedies that I might be able to give him to help him more effectively empty his anal glands. And at this point, too, I had switched him over to a fresh diet. And I had hoped that that would actually help with the problem. And it helped with some issues. It helped with the GI issues, most of them. But, and I'll get to that in a second. But we were still seeing problems with the pain from his anal glands. And so in my research, I came across the fact that, or I came across it mentioned that silica as a homeopathic remedy can actually be really helpful for pushing things out of the body. So it can be helpful for blocked anal glands. And I thought, well, let me talk to my vet about this. Let's see if we can try it. And my vet was actually really open to it. And she said, did you know that there is a homeopath in town? And I said, no. And she said, well, I think you could actually get the silica from him rather than ordering it online. Why don't you go and see him? So I did. I just happened to, on my way back from the vet's office, I popped into the homeopath and asked him if there was any chance I could pick up some silica. And luckily he did his due diligence and he said, well, can you talk to me about what it's for? And this is where I kind of joke around about how I never thought I would have to explain blocked anal glands in Spanish. But that's exactly what happened. Was I was all of a sudden telling him, well, these aren't for, it's not for me, it's for my dog. He's got blocked anal glands, and the vet said that you might be able to sell this to me. And he said, well, can I ask you some more questions? And so we talked a bit about what was going on with him and his kind of his past histories. And then he said, would you be willing to sit on the table? And what he did then, this is getting into the kinesiology. He used me as what's called a proxy. So my body was sort of standing in for Lucky because Lucky wasn't with me. And it worked because I have this loving connection with Lucky, and I set the intention of connecting with Lucky. And the homeopath proceeded, he had me kind of sit towards the end of the like the bed thing that they have you sit on, like the table, what do they call it that you sit on when you're at the doctor's office? And he had it so that my feet were hanging off the end. And he took my shoes off and he was balancing my heels like this, sort of like juggling my heels really lightly. And he was asking himself, like muttering questions. And it was, I recognized certain things. It was really low. He was just sort of like mumbling it to himself. And I recognized that what he was doing was a form of muscle testing. And this is where you ask the body, typically how you would do is you ask the body to show you a definitive yes and a definitive no. Muscle testing can take any number of forms. Some of the common ones are sway testing, where you would stand up and you would ask the body to show you a yes, and generally that involves that the body just naturally will start to lean forward towards, ask it to show you a clear and direct no, and it will move backwards. You might also have seen muscle testing with like interlocked fingers, where it would be like, show me a yes, show me a no. Oh, this would be a no would be this, and then like a weak response. And then yes would be that they stay closed, they stay connected. I don't prefer that one as much because I don't necessarily trust it in myself. I like the sway test. I also use a pendulum, actually, as a way of doing the same kind of thing. But what he was doing was using my heels. And what was brilliant about this experience for me was that I couldn't tell what he had identified as a yes or a no. So I knew that I wasn't impacting it. But I recognized that I heard the words column A and column B, and I was like, I know what he's doing. I recognized the emotion code by Dr. Bradley Nelson. And if you're not familiar with the emotion code, I can leave a link to this. Dr. Bradley Nelson was a chiropractor who started to recognize that his patients were storing blocked emotions in the body, and he drew upon these correlations between parts of the body and different types of emotions. And that has informed the way that I do my holistic kinesiology. And I tend to bring more of a Chinese medicine perspective into the way that I use it, referencing the way that organ systems are linked to particular emotions from a TCM perspective. So I kind of bring elements of that in, but there's a commonality where we're looking at the body. Certain parts of the body are responsible for or in connection to, in relation to particular emotions. So I recognize that this was what he was doing. And at the end of this, he told me that actually what was happening with Lucky with his health, and this stemmed back to his kidney issues, was that he was holding on to abandonment and fear. If you've listened to some of the earlier episodes, I tell you that how Lucky came to me was because his previous owner needed to find a new home for him. But that part of the issue was that when Lucky and his sibling were 2 weeks old, their mom was hit by a car and killed. And Lucky and his sibling were there at the accident. And some people have said to me, "Oh, dogs don't remember any of that, or that doesn't impact them." And yeah, they do. They absolutely do. And so not that has played into, again, it's kind of like this perfect storm that happened for Lucky. It's no one thing that has contributed to his health or his behavioral challenges, but I think it's a combination of things. And this is one of the combinations, one of the factors that contributed. And um he told me that he picked up on the fact that he had these blocked emotions stored in him. But he also, and so this is where things kind of come together, he also told me that Lucky had an intolerance to chicken. I had done blood tests for allergens at the vet, and he'd come up as negative for chicken. But as I was talking to the homeopath, he said, "Well, no, it's not a true allergy." So we've talked about this here in previous episodes, that allergies and intolerances are different. Chemically, they're different. So he's not allergic to chicken, but he's developed a sensitivity to chicken, which has led to an intolerance. And so, with that information, armed with that information of helping to support him at the emotional level and help to clear some of those fears through some clearing practices that we do in energy work, but also working to help support Lucky in a holistic perspective of building his confidence, but also recognizing that fear lives in the kidneys. And so then feeding him foods from a Chinese medicine perspective that help to bolster the kidneys. And then the big kicker for the anal glands was I removed chicken from his diet. As soon as I removed chicken, things started to clear up on the anal gland front. Now, because I've done so much work with him to help on all of those fronts, to help get him into a place where he's a lot healthier, his gut is a lot healthier. He actually can eat chicken now. So there's good news about that. Again, because it's not a true allergy, it is an intolerance. So we've been able to help heal him from that front. But I was so blown away with how this particular modality, and asking things from the perspective that the homeopath was asking them, and bringing together these different ways of supporting health, actually helped to really jumpstart Lucky's health journey. I became really interested in it and started studying these things. And so what I do now from the perspective of supporting clients, if you choose to have a consult with me, I send you a form that asks you to fill out medical history, send any recent tests that you might have done, that kind of a thing. But I also ask you questions like, is your dog nibbling like Lucky was on a particular part of their body, for example, when you start to see these patterns? Or is there a behavior that's occurring at particular times of the day? Are they sensitive on particular areas of their body? And you just start to make note of these patterns. And one really great example of a client I'm currently working with, where I applied this, she was really open to animal communication and Reiki and all of this kind of stuff. So it was wonderful that right from the get-go, I got to use some of these modalities to get a better picture of what was going on for the dog. And she had told me about parts of his body that he was sensitive, and also where he was either nibbling or sort of obsessively grooming, repeatedly grooming. And then I correlated that to meridians. in the body. So from a Chinese medicine perspective, there's a map of how the meridians, the energy meridians flow through the body. So I looked at where was there a commonality, if there was a commonality first, and there was, and what system that was pointing to. And because she also told me that there were certain behaviors, a lot of dysregulation, a lot of inability to settle and barking and just like feeling uncomfortable in his body repeatedly around the same time of night. I looked and that time, so again, from a TCM perspective, we see that there are certain times of the day that are governed by certain body systems. And the idea is that this sort of looks at the way that energy is flowing over a 24-hour period throughout the body. And so certain times are associated with certain systems in the body, organ systems in the body. There was a direct correlation between the meridians where he was nibbling or sensitive and the organs that were related to the time of day that he was showing dysregulation. But I also used muscle testing to correlate this stuff and to confirm a lot of this stuff. And what ended up happening is I discovered that what was being pointed out was that there was a potential dysregulation within the gallbladder system, which is linked to the liver system for the dog. This doesn't mean that he was having a liver or a gallbladder problem with the actual organ, but in Chinese medicine, the systems are governed by particular organs. So they're represented by particular organs. So what I then did from a diet perspective was I suggested that we start adding in extra support with foods and supplements that support the liver and gallbladder. And lo and behold, he has stopped. The dog has stopped nibbling in these places. He's also calm at night. So this is where those kinds of systems, those kinds of alternative ways of thinking about health and looking at health and taking that bigger picture can actually be a missing puzzle piece to figuring out what is going on when other tests are not necessarily giving us the full picture. And again, it's not about diagnosing. It's about saying, like, there's a potential blockage here. Let's explore that. Explore that with your vet. We can explore it through food and see what starts to happen. But I applied looking at that bigger picture in terms of behavior. And then I also was doing muscle testing by proxy with the dog. So I didn't see the dog in person. I was actually connecting energetically with the dog. And if you're like, well, how on earth does that happen? It's the way that all energy modalities work. It's based upon the principle that energy is neither created nor destroyed, and it's all connected, and that there is no time and space. So through our intention, it's similar to when I'm doing animal communication sessions, and it's like, well, how on earth can you pick this stuff up? You've never even met the dog. But I set the intention as the practitioner to connect with that dog's energetic field, and then I'm picking up on, because everything is connected, I'm just picking up on what is being transmitted. So it's a similar kind of thing with how it works by proxy. But basically what I was doing was muscle testing using my pendulum, going through the different systems and picking out where I was noticing that there were blockages, or and actually speaking to the dog's energy system in a similar way to what the homeopath did with me, where that he was using my heels to give a physical feedback. I was getting an energetic feedback using my pendulum of where in those kinds of columns and the systems and organs and what kinds of emotions. So I was also using that within the kinesiology, looking at what emotions were being potentially blocked and held in the body, and all of it pointed to the liver and gallbladder. So with that in mind, we then looked at modifying the diet, and we're seeing improvement as a result of that. So I just wanted to talk about that briefly, and I'll go into more detail. If you want to know more about it, I'm more than happy to share more information on how that works and how I use it. But the reason I bring it up is oftentimes when we're either given a diagnosis for our dogs, or we see that something is going wrong and then we're just trying to modify the diet, we can come at it from such a scientific perspective of specifically looking at nutrients and trying to, elimination and all that kind of stuff. And that is all great and important. Absolutely. And I do that as well. And I think when we start to look at energetics from the Chinese medicine perspective, and we bring in wellness practices like energy work, we start to build a bigger picture of what's going on and how we can support our dogs and ourselves on multiple levels. This also continues in my work with Lucky, where I regularly, like I mentioned, I'm a Reiki master. I regularly use Reiki on myself and on him to both kind of clear energy, but also, and I will talk more about this specifically with Reiki because I think that there is a huge difference between how Reiki is taught and practiced in the East and how we have brought it over into the West. And in some respects, I feel like we have lost some things in translation and that we can tend to still use that kind of allopathic perspective with Reiki about like I'm healing you, right? Or I'm sending the energy to you. And from my perspective and from my practice, Reiki really is a self-healing practice. And it works by me coming into a more regulated state within myself. And as a consequence, the client or the dog, my own dog or whoever's around me, even at a distance, because again, it works at a distance, that you begin to co-regulate with one another. And when we get into a state of regulation, that is when the body can heal itself at mind, body, and soul level. And so I think that's actually what's happening with these energy practices. So when I'm doing Reiki with the intention of supporting Lucky, it is focusing on how do I get into a calm space? How do I use that practice to really become embodied in myself whilst also recognizing that I'm connected to all that is? I am all that is. I am in connection with Lucky rather than I'm sending a particular field of energy to him to try to fix him, right? I think that's a very still an allopathic and a Western approach, but in reality, trusting that in the case of Lucky, he's whole and perfect as he is, and I'm just creating a space, an environment that is calm and regulated so he can come into a state of regulation. And that has also translated, so again, a bigger holistic perspective, that is also translated into how his behavior, his emotional life has improved in and out of the house, in and out of relation to any kind of illness. I recently posted for International Dog Day a little clip that I had taken of Lucky on a walk. And the reason I shared it was because it just showed how much more confident of a dog he has become as a result of not so much me doing particular training. Of course, I do training practices with them, and I am supportive of positive training practices. But again, it's pulling it all together that your life is a whole thing. Training doesn't just happen when you have a training session set up. The way you are in your life, the way you're being in your life impacts the way that your dog is being and how they're behaving. And so, because I have more consciously been practicing coming into a regulated state for myself, he is much more regulated. And the little clip that I showed was we were walking down the pavement, the kind of, yeah, pavement sidewalk, UK, US. Um, and on the other side of the street is a dog that we regularly pass. And I should preface it that the reason this was successful with Lucky was because the other dog was on a lead, on a leash. He would not have been so calm with off-leash dogs because he has been attacked by them and they are triggering for him still, understandably. But this dog we pass quite regularly, but he would always, when we first started passing them, even though they were well on the other side of the street and leashed up, he would start to get like explosively triggered by this dog. And as a in you can see in the clip, it's on my Instagram if you want to check it out, that now he just notices her. He just notices her and keeps on doing what he's doing. And there have been elements of training that have helped him out with that. But I think so much of it is about all of these regulating practices that I'm incorporating for myself and for him to create an environment of regulation. And that is supporting his health, mind, body, and soul. So that was just a quick little thing where I wanted to introduce you to some other well-being practices that I bring into the discussion when we're talking about nutrition and how we best nourish our dogs and ourselves, mind, body, and soul. So if you're interested in hearing more about it, I'm happy to do some more episodes on that. I'll also be talking to you, like I mentioned, about other healing modalities that I use and how I think that they are helpful when we're trying to take a holistic perspective on our dog's health and to get to the root of a lot of things, which have energetic and emotional components. So, does this resonate with you with this approach of taking into account nutrition, energetics, and well being when it comes to supporting your dog's health? If you would like some support on either improving your dog's current diet, or you have a dog who's got some health challenges and you're wondering how a fresh food diet might be able to support them, and you resonate with this approach of looking at more than just a recipe, more than just the food, but also looking at energetics and well being, I would be so excited to support you. I have a really fantastic, really exciting announcement to make that for the month of September, in order to kind of celebrate both my birthday month as well as back to school, I am offering 15% off all of my nutrition and wellness plans. So you can go to mysticdogmama.com to check that out. But essentially, what it is that I've got plans to help support healthy adult dogs. If you just want me to kind of help you to figure out how to create an optimal diet and wellness plan for your dog. But also, if you've got a dog with some health challenges and you need more than just a recipe, and I'll talk about this in some upcoming episodes and posts as well on Instagram on why I think it's important, particularly for therapeutic diets, to get more than just a recipe and more than just one recipe, because I've had so many clients come to me after having just bought a recipe from a nutrition consultant and are feeling not only overwhelmed, but they're kind of left trying to figure this out when something doesn't work quite right and they no longer have support from the consultant. So I have set up some services that are actually a lot more supportive than what you would typically expect to find. Where, yes, I do give you recipes, I do give you plant nutrition plans, but you definitely get more than one, because I feel like variety, even with therapeutic diets, is so important. There are some rare exceptions where particular conditions really limit what we can feed a dog, but in most cases, we can do a really varied diet for dogs, taking into consideration their particular needs and the condition that they might be facing, but also using these perspectives of energetics and well being to put together a plan and a lifestyle for you and your dog that helps support you well beyond your time working with me. But I do have plans that run for several months so that you have the support that you need throughout this whole health journey process, and you're not just left having to figure this stuff out on your own. So I invite you to check them out, mysticdogmama.com. Otherwise, if you have questions, you want to talk to me about stuff, you can either leave me a note in the comments. You can also direct message me on Instagram at mysticdogmama, and you can also email me, and all of the information is in the show notes. All right. I wish you a wonderful end to these lovely dog days of summer. I'm so excited about fall coming and cooling down just a little bit here in the Northern Hemisphere. But I hope that you have a wonderful end of summer with your fur babies and the rest of your family and friends. And I will talk to you next time. Take care. Bye.